Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Joseph Ryder Anderson podcast. Today, we are going to be diving into the top decks to look out for in the Bleach Union Arena Rare Battle format, Volume 2. Very exciting. I loved the first round of rare battles with Bleach, and the game has evolved so much that these rare battles are going to feel very differently to what the base set rare battles felt like. So we're going to go over 4 different decks specifically and talk about some other peripheral strategies to watch out for, with the idea that these are probably going to be the main decks that you're going to run into. I know the rare battles I go to, there's usually a trend of like 2 or 3 main decks that you run into at any given rare battle, and I think these are going to be well represented in that selection. One thing, I did recently add my podcast to YouTube Podcasts, so that was something I probably should have done a while ago. I don't know why I didn't. But for those of you who don't know me, I own josephryderanderson.com, which is a website that gets millions of views and visitors every year, specifically on TCGs, but I do write about other things too. So one thing I have already been getting comments about is if I'm going to turn this into a video series, and as of right now, this is definitely staying audio only. I don't see a reason personally right now to turn it into a video series. I primarily want to do this as a podcast and companion to the articles that I write every day on the website. So the focus of the podcast for right now, for those who are new to it, is right now it's focused primarily on Union Arena, but that could change. I do write about other TCGs, so over time I could incorporate more content on those TCGs, but I'm extra passionate about Union Arena right now, and I'm really excited about this game, so I can't write about it or talk about it enough. And in that vein, today we are talking about the Union Arena Bleach Rare Battle format. I was taken a little surprised. So I've been kind of obsessively checking tournaments data and things like that, and I was taken a little surprised by the top deck in the formats. The top deck still is Purple Bleach, so it's not going to be Purple Bleach by as much as it was in the first set. But I think really the main changes that you're going to see, it's going to be more of a what way are people building Purple Bleach. So for right now, people have decided that the main way that they want to build Purple Bleach is around the Squad Zero build. So I think what happened is a lot of people got scared off by the fact that Rukia 0 was not included in Volume 2. I think a lot of people assumed it would be included in Volume 2 because it made Purple Bleach a little too strong originally, and so people probably figured, okay, well, now that we're getting to Volume 2, we'll get Rukia 0. And that did not happen, and I think a lot of people just were like, okay, well, let's just go with the Zero Squad build and leverage, essentially use it for how good it is at draw, removal, and then that 4-cost Ichigo, which comes in with damage to Impact 1 and has the Nullify. And those are all good reasons to play this deck. And right now, this is probably the most prominent deck in Union Arena in general, and you're going to run into this deck a lot in the format. So it's not really actually all that complicated of a deck once you play it a couple times. There are some new cards that you won't be used to, so if you have not touched Volume 2 yet, it might seem a little overwhelming at first, but essentially you are really focusing on removal. Senjumaru gives you a powerful new removal tool, and then you still have, most people are still running that 5-cost Ichigo, although at a lower click. This list that I share in the article, again, I'll share this in the show notes or in the description on YouTube, whatever you want to call it. And this list is running 3 of the 5-cost Ichigo, which seems pretty standard. This list, by the way, was by Anton, and it placed Anto, whoever that is. Congrats, Anto, for getting 4th at the tournament. What was that tournament called? Let me pull that up, because I definitely want to give creds to this person. Anyways, I'll look that up and share in a moment. What was I saying? Senjumaru, very solid. Oh yeah, 4th place at the Haven Summer Showdown 36-player tournament by Anto. So congrats to you for getting 4th. This deck, Purple Bleach in general, and it was all different versions of the Squad Zero Ichigo build. That was the most prominent deck in the top 8. I think 3 of the decks in the top 8 were Purple Bleach, which is really phenomenal for Purple Bleach. So this deck definitely has some gas. I'm surprised because I find I think the Rukia build is underrated. I have tested the Rukia quite a bit in different versions of Purple Bleach, and having that 2-cost Rukia is super, super solid. I agree the 0 cost would have been even more solid, but the 2 cost feels solid enough to me. So I think that a lot of people are missing out by not doing the Rukia build. And I'll tell you why. So if you look at this Squad 0 deck, it has really solid draw. So you have the Royal Palace. This list is only running a 2 of though, so that's going to reduce the amount of times you see it. But the Royal Palace essentially lets you draw a card every turn, which is really strong. The Ichigo has an effect that essentially lets you draw a card as long as you can remember what cards you put on top of your deck, which I find a little difficult. And then you have this special that lets you draw. So the way it works is you remove Squad 0 characters from your hand to the removal area, and then that adds BP to the range of what it can remove. And then for each card you add to your removal area, you then get to draw more cards. So there's just a lot of draw in this deck. You also have some filtering via the Nimaya card, so he can filter. And then if you manage to use the Ichigo, 4-cost Ichigo's effect, you can draw a card. So people are kind of using this as an alternate to the Rukia engine, as a way to see more cards. And then the really big advantage of building your deck in this hybrid fashion is that the 4-cost Ichigo becomes really strong. So it's pretty easy to buff him up to a damage 2 impact 1 character, with the only con that I've found being that he doesn't come in rated, right? Like he's a raidless character, so you do have to wait a turn. You have to essentially probably play him to your back line, otherwise he'll just get picked off. Play him to your back line, wait a turn, and then he comes out as a damage 2 impact 1 with nullify impact, which is really solid. And that's really this kind of a build is the only time you're going to be able to take advantage of that 4-cost Ichigo at full power. So here's my problem with this build, and tell me if I'm missing something. But my problem with this build is I feel like you have 2 conflicting strategies going on here. And they're not entirely conflicting. I wouldn't say they're juxtaposed, but they are a little bit in conflict, which is you have the 5-cost Ichigo, you have the 4-cost Ichigo. Both those guys need a significant amount of cards in sideline to use their effects. So this deck is not sending cards to sideline very often. You can. The Royal Palace can do that. Usually, though, you're not doing that. And for the most part, you're sending cards directly into your removal area. That's going to make it a little tough to hit those high numbers. I mean, remember, Ichigo needs about 8 cards in sideline to hit a 4K character and take that 4K character out. Ichigo, the 4-cost Ichigo, needs 4 cards in sideline just to gain impact. So there's a lot of cards that you need in your sideline to activate these effects, and you're not necessarily going to have those all the time. So I guess that for a lot of people it doesn't matter, because you have the removal via Senjumaru, which you can just remove cards from your hand in order to get rid of characters. But I just think that there's a bit of a conflict in the strategy there. The one thing that doesn't conflict is that Ichigo, if you play that 5-cost Ichigo or even the 4-cost and selectively remove the Squad 0 characters that you want to be in your sideline in order to activate the 4-cost Ichigo fully, that is one complementary thing. But these guys are so powerful, Ichigo and Kurosaki, the 5-cost and the 4-cost are so powerful on their own that it seems like, okay, using them just to power up your 4-cost Ichigo is not necessarily like the greatest to me. So I think that there's a lot of interesting things with this build. I do think it's probably largely being played because we don't have the 0-cost Rukia. But I would, if you are looking for a different way to play this deck and you want to go more all in on those cards from your sideline, that whole strategy that focuses on the sideline that Bleach Purple is known for, you can certainly still build this deck with Rukia. I won a tournament recently where I did a Byakuya Rukia Ichigo build, and I only ran 2 of the 4-cost Ichigos. I didn't really focus on, I don't think I included any Squad 0, but Ichigo can still buff to a damage 2 character with nullify impact, which is handy. So there are definitely other ways to build this, and I think as we see time go by, more people will realize that 2-cost Rukia is really strong. Actually, to me, was probably the single strongest card added to the Purple Bleach strategy. So people will probably realize how strong she is and start building around Ichigo Rukia again. But for the purposes of this, I'm just sharing what you're likely to see as of right now in your Bleach Rare Battle format. So you are going to have to face down, you'll be facing down probably a ton of Squad 0 decks. So be ready for that and what that means And the best play you can do against this deck is just to get rid of that 4-cost Ichigo on site. So if they ever put that 4-cost Ichigo to your front line, you just get rid of that 4-cost Ichigo. That's the best thing you can do. Moving on from there, let's talk about a deck that a lot of people are really interested in. I had a lot of people really upset with me for putting this deck farther down on my initial ranking. I think people get a little confused because I do these preview rankings before a set comes out, and I'm just kind of assessing how these decks are going to do in the general meta, based on where the English meta is at. And there's a lot of kind of creative interpretation going on there. And I did put Yellow Bleach towards the bottom, and that wasn't because I think Yellow Bleach is bad. I really don't think Yellow Bleach is bad. I just think Bleach Volume 2 is so good that it's, there's a lot of good decks in that set, and Yellow Bleach is on the lower end of that set, but that does not mean it's a bad deck because Bleach Volume 2 is a really solid set. With that being said, this deck I think is definitely a top pick for the rare battle format. I think the one problem I see with running Yellow Bleach is I don't see it having a particularly great matchup against Purple Bleach. I think it does really, really well against the other decks, and actually may even have an advantage against the other decks besides Purple Bleach. But I do think the main theme that you're gonna see at Bleach Rare Battles is going to be not so much, the variety is not going to be so much in terms of colors as it's going to be in terms of how people build Purple Bleach. Because there's just a lot of different ways now to build Purple Bleach. You can build it around Renji and Ichigo. You can build it around Ichigo and Rukia. You can build it around Ichigo and Squad Zero. You can build it around Byakuya. There's so many different ways to build Purple Bleach, and I don't see Yellow Bleach going well into any of those builds, sadly. So I think sometimes you can win tournaments by countering the counter meta, right? So if you're playing this deck because you're expecting to run into all of the other decks, that I think Yellow Bleach can do really well for you, but I don't think it trades super well into Bleach Purple. And the reason for why I say that, as I highlight in the article that I'm going to link to, is that Jacel is this deck's main character, and Jacel is a really strong character. He's a 2 action point character, so it does take 2 action points to play him. And when he's played, though, he lets you draw 2 cards and you discard 2 cards. That might sound kind of funny. There's not a lot of cards that have you draw the same number of cards you discard. But in this deck, it works because you're trying to get your zombie characters into the discard. So you want a lot of zombie characters in the discard, and you actually only have 8 zombie characters total. So you need to get those zombie characters in the discard so you can then bring them back with Jacel's other effect, which is if he's on the front line, you can sideline a character and bring back a non-zombie character, and bring back a zombie character set to active. That's really good, especially since your 2 zombie characters have really powerful effects. So you got the Toshiro that comes in and he just straight up rests a character, which can then be sidelined if you raid a Bambietta. And then you got the zombie Bambietta who comes in, you draw a card. So you can essentially draw 3 cards if you played Jacel that turn. And then you can pay an AP and gain impact. Again, that makes it that having to pay that AP is particularly bad in this deck, I think, because you're already having to play 2 AP to play the Jacel, which makes it very unlikely you're ever going to get that impact off. But in the if you are able to bring back some Bambiettas towards the end of the game, and all you need to do is to close it out is to pay an AP to gain impact, that's not so bad. So this deck has a lot of powerful tools. I think its main problem is Jacel needs to be on the front line to use his effect. And once he's on the front line, he's a really easy target for the removal from Bleach Purple. So you're going to just have a tough time against Bleach Purple would be my only kind of thing to say there. I think on the other side against Green Bleach, the way it's built right now, doesn't run a ton of removal. A lot of people are running a lesser count of the Kenpachi, the 2-cost Kenpachi. So they're really leaning heavily on Toshiro, and Toshiro doesn't do well against Jacel, right? Because Jacel, you don't need to attack with Jacel. You can. He's got 4,000 BP, but he just needs to be on your front line. So Toshiro locking him down on the front line essentially does nothing, right? In fact, it actually kind of would hurt them if they locked him down, because now all of a sudden they don't want to use another removal effect on a character who's locked down. So in a weird way, Jacel is kind of impervious to Toshiro. You can think of it that way. So this deck should go plenty well into Kenpachi, or the new Bleach Green. It doesn't rely too much. It does rely a little bit on BP reducing effects, which you won't be able to use against Kenpachi, but that's not huge. You can straight up rest characters with your Toshiro. So you have a little bit of Toshiro on Toshiro action happening in this matchup, which is always great to see. So yeah, I see this as a decent matchup for yellow. And then against blue, blue doesn't have a ton of removal. The other blue deck, so I'm talking about, well, actually both blue decks, because if you go up against Rukia and she locks you down, same thing, doesn't hurt you. If you go against the Ichigo build and they're running that 2 action point Ichigo who bounces, okay, now you get to recycle your Jacel, which is awesome. So it's a really decent matchup. And if you get those combos up and running, you can really just overwhelm your opponent with Yellow Bleach. So again, tough matchup for Purple Bleach, which is a problem when Purple Bleach will probably be the most commonly played deck, but really solid matchups to the others. Talking about Green Bleach, the strongest build seems to be, and we're seeing this showing up in tournaments, and I think we'll see it show up in more tournaments as people figure out how to play this deck. And that is the Green Bleach build based around Toshiro and Kenpachi. I personally would run the 2 action point Kenpachi at a 4. In this list, it doesn't. I borrowed this list from someone who was at a tournament, I believe. But yeah, at a tournament, won a tournament, or placed in a tournament. So I was just sharing someone else's perspective. But I would probably run the Kenpachi at 4, just because you need a lot of removal. But this deck, I had originally thought that Green Bleach was going to be really a favorite in the rare battle format. But if people are not playing the Ichigo, Rukia, Byakuya builds as much, then this deck is not going to be quite as much of a counter as I had said. The reason I was really feeling this deck for the rare battle is that both your Kenpachi Zaraki 4-cost and your Kenpachi Zaraki raid can't be reduced by BP reducing effects. So that essentially gives you like 8 different Kenpachi characters that are just impervious to purple Ichigo and Byakuya. So that's a really strong counter. However, that's not as strong of a counter against the Purple Bleach with Squad 0, because Senjumaru is not reducing BP. Senjumaru is just getting rid of characters. So it will help you not be a target to Ichigo, but it won't do anything against Senjumaru. So it's not as strong of a counter as you might think, although it still does have some, that is still some nice countering to be had against Purple Bleach. And it's not like that's the only thing that this deck has going for it. You have Kenpachi's other effect that lets him not be basically not be sidelined if he's rated on top of a 4-cost character. You still have that Toshiro freezing effect, which is really strong against Purple Bleach, no problem there. And also is really strong against the Ichigo. It's a great effect to lock down that 4-cost Ichigo and preventing him from coming in with the impact 1 damage 2. So you have a lot of tools in this deck. I really like Green Bleach still. Definitely watch for that Yachiru boosting the raid Kenpachi specifically to a really heavy hitter. That Kenpachi is becoming just as strong as the 4-cost Ichigo via Yachiru. So it's just a really strong deck here. I think overall, Green Bleach is the most well-rounded deck. It doesn't have any problems with Purple Bleach. It doesn't have, I would say, it does have a little bit of issues with Yellow Bleach, so that's something to consider. It's not going to have any issues with Blue Bleach either. So definitely a solid pick if you're looking for something that's very reliable and very strong. Go with Green Bleach. And then the final deck I want to highlight is one that won the large-scale rare battle. So the first large-scale rare battle with Volume 2 Bleach. And I really like this deck. This is the Ichigo blue deck. So I had really paid more attention previously to the Rukia Toolbox version of this deck. Partly because Rukia is really cool and her Bankai card looks awesome. But actually, I'm really liking the Ichigo build better. I think Blue Ichigo brings more into the format than the Rukia build does. It does more. I think Rukia to me feels like a less strong Hitsugaya card with some cool strategies around the 2 action point cards. But I think that the Blue Ichigo essentially feels to me like an aggro deck. And there isn't really an aggro deck in Bleach, but this deck feels like an aggro deck. It's looking to draw a ton of cards, and you have lots of potential to draw cards. Doesn't have anything over a 4 energy cost. The 3-cost Renji is incredibly strong for a 3-cost character, and even though he's a 2 action point character, he kind of gets rid of one of those as long as you meet the requirements. He restands an AP, so that's really strong. And you just have, again, tons of draw power. And this deck is really looking to just pummel through your opponents. You have characters capable of attacking through opponents, like the 2-cost Ichigo. That's really hard to block. So the strategy here is to just move quickly, draw a lot of cards, move quickly, take a lot of life early, and then close things out with characters that are tough to block. So I really like that. And then you got the Ichigo, the 4-cost Ichigo, who can just straight up bounce characters back to the hand. So I think this deck is pretty solid choice as well. You'll probably see a lot of that Rukia build, but I think this is actually probably the stronger blue build, and I think it really just comes down to how quickly you can get going. Like, can you stop the removal heavy purple Bleach? Can you get in there and cause a lot of damage before they're able to start getting their stronger characters out? Or can you take down and disrupt yellow Bleach before those powerful zombie combos start coming up? I think that's going to be the main name of the game. I think it's going to struggle the most against green Kenpachi, because green Kenpachi isn't really a late game. It's really mid-range. So you're not going to have as strategic of an advantage going into that. But other than that, I think it should fare pretty well in the Bleach Rare Battle format. So to sum things up, Purple Bleach is the strongest removal deck, but you will be faced with doing a lot of mirror matches. So if you want to play Purple Bleach really badly, make sure you practice those mirror matches and practice it against the different ways that you can build Purple Bleach. Go with blue if you want to go with a really fast deck, with a really fast deck in a format without other decks that can match it. I think that's its main advantage. It's a very aggressive deck for this format, and more aggressive than the other decks. Green Kenpachi, as I said, really well-rounded and consistent deck, and it goes particularly well into the Ichigo, Rukia, or Byakuya build, especially Byakuya. It's a very good matchup against Byakuya, because Byakuya's special also is a BP reducing effect. So if you are anticipating a lot of those more like traditional Bleach purple builds, then definitely run with green Kenpachi. And then yellow Bleach, if you love combos and you are okay with the struggle against purple Bleach but love that it does well against the other decks, yellow Bleach could be the deck for you. I hope that helps. Join the Discord, follow me on X, share your own deck lists that have done well at the Union Arena Bleach Rare Battle format, and I look forward to talking to you next time.